Eddie Levert's story is often told through the force of his voice, a sound that became inseparable from American soul music. As the commanding frontman of the OJs, he helped shape songs like Love Train, Backstabbers, and For the Love of Money into cultural landmarks that spoke to dignity, struggle, and collective hope. Yet behind the power of that voice was a life shaped by hardship long before fame ever arrived. Born in Bessemer, Alabama, in 1942, Eddie grew up in a world defined by poverty, racial segregation, and relentless labor. His earliest experiences were not of applause, but of silence, hunger, and watching his parents endure exhausting work just to keep a fragile household together. Even as a child, he absorbed the emotional weight of survival, learning that music in church was not just expression but release. That foundation would later become the emotional core of his artistry, turning personal memory into universal feeling carried through every performance he would ever give. Roots in hard ground and the Great Migration, Eddie Levert's early life was shaped by movement and uncertainty, as his family joined the Great Migration from the South to the industrial North in search of opportunity. Leaving Alabama for Canton, Ohio, meant exchanging red clay and church-filled Sundays for cold streets, factory smoke, and long winters that seemed to press inward on daily life. His father labored in steel mills, while his mother worked in domestic service, both sacrificing comfort for survival. The household was defined by scarcity, yet also by faith and resilience. Eddie often witnessed his mother quietly masking her hunger so her children could eat, an image that would stay with him for life. In Ohio, poverty did not disappear. It simply changed shape, becoming colder and more isolating. Still, music remained present in the family's Sunday gatherings, where singing became both spiritual refuge and emotional survival. These early experiences shaped Eddie's understanding that struggle was not something to escape, but something to transform into strength through voice and unity. Church beginnings and the awakening of a voice. In Canton, Ohio, the church became the place where Eddie Levert first discovered the full emotional reach of his voice. Within the walls of small Baptist congregations, music carried a weight that went beyond melody, becoming a form of testimony and release. Encouraged by his mother, who believed his voice held something extraordinary, Eddie sang with a sincerity that moved congregations before he even understood his own talent. Each note reflected lived experience, hunger, hope, uncertainty, and faith blended into sound. Outside the church, life remained difficult, with schoolyard teasing and the constant reminder of poverty shaping his confidence. Yet inside the choir, he was transformed, discovering that music could shift atmosphere and emotion in ways words alone could not. These early performances were not about ambition but survival, offering a sense of identity in a world that often ignored him. Over time, singing became less of a choice and more of a calling that would define his entire future path. The formation of the OJs and years of struggle. As Eddie grew older, he joined with fellow musicians to form what would eventually become the OJs, named after Cleveland DJ Eddie OJ, who supported their early development. The group spent years navigating rejection, financial struggle, and uncertainty while chasing recognition in a competitive music industry. Early recordings failed to gain traction, and the members often found themselves traveling long distances in unreliable cars, performing for small crowds or minimal pay. Despite setbacks, Eddie's voice remained steady and determined, anchoring the group's identity through hardship. Some members eventually left, discouraged by lack of progress, but Eddie and a few others persisted, believing that endurance itself was a form of progress. Their persistence reflected a deeper truth. Success in music was not immediate, but built through repetition, resilience, and belief in something unseen. Those years of obscurity became foundational, shaping the emotional intensity that would later define their greatest recordings and elevate them from local performers to global icons. Rise to fame and the Philadelphia sound explosion. The turning point for the OJs came when they joined Philadelphia International Records in the early 1970s, a partnership that transformed their sound and destiny. Under the production of Kenneth Gamble and Leon Huff, Their music evolved into a polished yet emotionally grounded style that blended social commentary with irresistible rhythm. Songs like Backstabbers and Love Train captured both personal and collective experience, resonating across audiences worldwide. Fame arrived quickly and overwhelmingly, shifting the group from struggling musicians to international stars performing for massive crowds and earning unprecedented success. However, the speed of their rise brought new pressures. Touring schedules became relentless, and the demands of the industry left little room for rest or reflection. Despite commercial triumph, Eddie often felt the distance between external success and internal exhaustion. Contracts and royalties sometimes failed to reflect their contributions, adding frustration beneath the surface of fame. Even at their peak, Eddie understood that recognition did not always equal fulfillment or control. The cost of success and the weight of the industry. As the OJs reached the height of their popularity, the realities of the music industry revealed a harsher side of success. Constant touring, financial disputes, and demanding performance schedules placed enormous strain on the group. Eddie Levert found himself performing hundreds of shows a year, often pushing through fatigue and emotional exhaustion to meet expectations. Behind the applause, there were long stretches of silence, travel, and physical depletion that rarely reached the public eye. While audiences saw glamour, Eddie experienced pressure and responsibility that weighed heavily on both body and spirit. The emotional toll of performing the same songs repeatedly while navigating contracts and financial challenges created a sense of imbalance between artistic expression and commercial obligation. Yet he continued, driven by a sense of duty to both his music and his audience. Over time, success became less about celebration and more about endurance, requiring him to sustain a voice that carried not just songs, but entire eras of experience and struggle. Family life, distance, and personal sacrifice. Outside of music, Eddie Levert's personal life was shaped by love, responsibility, and the unintended consequences of fame. His marriage to Martha brought stability during his early years of struggle, and together they built a family grounded in shared hope and resilience. However, as the OJs rose to international prominence, long tours and constant travel created increasing distance within the household. Eddie often found himself absent during key moments of family life, a reality that slowly strained relationships over time. His children grew up partly in the shadow of his career, experiencing both pride and absence. The tension between providing for a family and being physically present became one of the most difficult balances of his life. Though he never stopped caring deeply for his family, the demands of success often pulled him away from home. Looking back, Eddie has acknowledged that providing material stability could not replace emotional presence, a realization that carried lasting weight throughout his later years. The loss of Gerald and a father's breaking point. In 2006, Eddie Levert experienced a devastating loss when his eldest son, Gerald Levert, passed away unexpectedly. Gerald, a talented singer in his own right, shared not only his father's musical ability, but also his emotional depth and stage presence. Their bond was both personal and professional, strengthened through collaborations and shared performances. Gerald's death marked a profound rupture in Eddie's life, shattering the emotional foundation he had relied on. The grief was immediate and overwhelming, leaving him unable to sing at times or fully process the reality of the loss. On stage, moments that once felt natural became unbearable, as songs associated with Gerald carried new emotional weight. For Eddie, music transformed from expression into memory, each performance a reminder of absence. The world continued to celebrate his legacy, but privately, he was navigating a grief that altered his relationship with both music and fatherhood in irreversible ways. The passing of Sean and deepening grief. Just 2 years after Gerald's death, Eddie Levert faced another devastating blow with the passing of his son Sean in 2008. Sean, known for his quieter strength and spiritual nature, had also been part of the family's musical legacy. His loss compounded the grief Eddie was already carrying, creating a sense of emotional collapse that few could fully comprehend. The repetition of tragedy deepened his silence, making music both necessary and painful. Songs performed on stage now carried layered meaning, as audiences witnessed a man singing through unimaginable loss. Eddie's resilience became visible not in avoidance of grief, but in continuing despite it. The weight of losing two sons reshaped his understanding of life, faith, and endurance. What had once been a career defined by success became a journey marked by remembrance, where every performance was also a tribute to voices that were no longer physically present, but remained emotionally inseparable from his own. Later years, healing, and enduring love. In the years that followed, Eddie Levert gradually found moments of stability through family, reflection, and continued music. His later relationships and renewed companionship brought a quieter form of peace, offering balance after decades of turbulence. While grief never fully disappeared, it became part of his daily rhythm rather than an overwhelming force. He often reflected on how love, even after loss, continues to shape identity and purpose. Performing remained central to his life, but its meaning evolved, becoming less about achievement and more about connection and remembrance. Through grandchildren, new family bonds, and ongoing performances, Eddie continued to find reasons to remain present in the world he helped shape. His story became not only one of success but of survival through emotional endurance, where healing was not defined by forgetting, but by continuing to live alongside memory. The silent weight of brotherhood and early departures. Beyond family tragedy and personal grief, another layer of Eddie Levert's life was shaped by the fragile bonds within the OJs themselves and the wider circle of musicians who built the foundation of their sound. The group was never just a professional arrangement, it was a brotherhood forged through shared poverty, rejection, and long nights of uncertain hope. Members like William Powell were not interchangeable voices, but emotional anchors whose harmonies defined the group's identity. Powell's illness and eventual passing marked a devastating turning point, stripping away the familiar textures that had shaped their earliest success. Eddie often described the experience not simply as losing a colleague, but as losing a part of the sound that had carried their collective dreams. The absence was immediate on stage, where songs once layered in harmony suddenly felt hollow in places where Powell's voice used to rise. Each performance after that loss carried a quiet tension, as Eddie had to rebuild emotional balance while standing in the same spaces where brotherhood once felt unbreakable. The stage became both a tribute and a reminder, forcing him to continue even as pieces of the foundation disappeared. These early departures within the group mirrored the larger pattern of his life. Everything built with love and struggle seemed to come with the constant risk of loss, leaving behind echoes that no amount of success could fully replace. Endurance, legacy, and the meaning of still standing. In his later years, Eddie Levert's life became less about reaching new heights and more about understanding the meaning of continuing after unimaginable loss. Where earlier decades were defined by ambition and struggle, the later chapters were shaped by reflection and endurance. He often stood on stage, not as a man chasing success, but as a father carrying memory, a survivor of both triumph and tragedy. The audience saw a legendary performer, but behind the voice was someone constantly negotiating between presence and absence, between what was gained and what could never be recovered. Music became a space where grief, gratitude, and resilience coexisted without resolution. Rather than separating his pain from his art, Eddie allowed them to exist together, transforming every performance into something deeper than entertainment. It became a form of remembrance, a way of honoring those who shaped his life and those who were no longer physically present. Even as age slowed his steps, his voice retained its emotional clarity, carrying decades of lived experience in every phrase. In the end, Eddie Levert's legacy is not defined solely by the songs he helped create, but by the way he continued to sing through life's most devastating silences, proving that endurance itself can become a form of love that never stops echoing. A legacy written in sound and survival. Eddie Levert's legacy extends far beyond chart success or musical accolades. His voice carries the emotional history of a generation shaped by struggle, migration, love, and loss. Through the OJs, he helped define a sound that spoke to both personal and collective experience, blending joy with social truth. Yet, his most enduring contribution may be the honesty embedded in his journey, an artist who never separated music from life's hardest realities. From poverty in Alabama to global stages, from family joy to unimaginable grief, his story reflects the full spectrum of human experience. Even in silence, his influence persists, carried through songs that continue to resonate across time. Eddie Levert remains not only a symbol of musical excellence, but of endurance, showing that even through profound loss, the human voice can still carry meaning, memory, and an unbroken connection to those who came before and those who remain. Top of form, bottom of form,